knows too much.
5,000 years ago, when a culture emerged in what is now Afghanistan, in a town that hardly exists anymore. It was on the road that connected the Middle East, Europe, and Africa with China and India. And that road diverged. You could either, once you got past Bactria, you could either go in the direction towards China, or you could go take the southern route and go down into India over the Khyber Pass. This area was turned into a lush Garden of Eden, and I believe this is where the Garden of Eden myths originate from. When Alexander the Great conquered the world, he propelled his army towards Bactria. This was the strongest city on the what became known as the Silk Road. There was no silk on this road. It was really the cannabis road. And cannabis is what plays such a big, important role in this story. It seems that the culture that emerged around the Black Sea area and the culture that emerged around Bactria, they got together. I don't know if it was climate change that pushed the Afghan out of the hills and down to the Caspian Sea, or if it was the horse-riding Ukrainians who came in to Bactria and mingled with the population, or whatever. This is so far back in time, and the thing is, we got great records on Egyptian history because they kept records. But there are no records of the first 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years of the Silk Road. And it wasn't until very recently that they discovered the connection between the Europeans and the mummies in the Kurgan tombs in China. So the mummies are basically what we would consider Celtic. And they wear tartans, and the thing about them is there's a lot of cannabis everywhere, so they have colas crossed on their chests, they have medicine bags filled with it, and they often have a golden chalice, which was the main ceremonial tool. From this chalice they would drink a mixture of milk and cannabis, what we call bhang today. And this was no little thing. This was all up and down the Silk Road, all through India and China, all the way through into Europe. People were drinking this elixir. And this is the real origin of the Holy Grails, the Eucharist, the Knights of the Round Table. King Arthur really has his origins in this culture. When the culture became identified as the Scythians, it was already the dominant force all across the Silk Road. So this has been ignored by most historians, that this immense cannabis-using culture dominated trade. They ran the slave market and the drug and spice market. They were the first horse riders. Horses were actually small in the beginning. They pulled carts, put a couple of them to pull a chariot. But as they bred the horses bigger and bigger and bigger, they were mountable. And the Scythians were the first people to wear pants because everybody was riding horses. And it was a warrior culture. All the children were raised communally by blinded slaves and taught to shoot with a recumbent bow. They're riding around and they come upon a culture and they're dealing with, like an axe-toting dude. He's just wearing some animal skin or something. And they've got gold armor and these elaborate tattoos and very tall, pointy hats. A lot of red. They wear a lot of red. And they're on horseback, and nobody's seen anybody ride a horse before. And oh, by the way, they've got a recumbent bow that is like the Tommy gun of the steppes. And these teenagers can take you out from 100 yards. And they can fire it, get off 5 or 6 arrows before you even know what's going on. So the Amazon myth, the story of this female tribe of Amazon warriors of superpowers or whatever, this all comes from the Scythians too, because all the males and females were both trained as warriors from birth practically, and learned how to ride and shoot. That was the beginning of knight culture. The Scythians were finally defeated. The Persians could never defeat them. And the Zoroastrians inherited a lot of Scythian spirituality and just absorbed it because they were so dominant. Alexander the Great's father, Philip, was the first to beat the Scythians, and he did it by inventing a very, very long lance, like 3 times longer than the normal javelin carried by, the Greeks. He used those lances to fend off the cavalry charges. It was because of that innovation that his son could go across the Silk Road and conquer the known world. But when the Romans, inherited that world, they hired the Scythians out. They bought them off. And they became the most important mercenary force in the Roman army. They were posted all over Europe, the Scythians. And they came with their wives and their children. And so when they would be located, they'd be relocated with their entire culture. That's why you find the King Arthur stories that run through various countries of Europe. They're slightly different stories, but they're all emanating from this one source. The search for the Holy Grail is really the search for cannabis, which in the original stories is the key to bringing peace to the kingdom. But these Scythians were not a peaceful people. They were entirely ruthless. It took a long time, millennia, for this idea, manners, karma, and whatever got the ball rolling on the chivalry aspect of knighthood. That was a bit of a change. Now, I can tell you the big ceremony of when a Scythian boy or girl moved into adulthood and became a full-fledged member of the tribe was when they killed an enemy combatant on the field of battle. And the ceremony held immediately afterwards, as soon as it was possible, was for the victor, chop off the skull cap, the vanquished, use that top of the skull as a chalice to drink fresh blood, the enemy's fresh blood. And everybody would stand around and cheer while the teenage boy or girl drank that blood. A lot of these pieces of human anatomy were taken home and used as the primary sacramental tool for the rest of that person's life. And in most cases, they would encase it with a gold base. So, that's the real history of the Holy Grail. Now, in Scythian culture, they said that the Golden Grail came down from the sky, and it was so hot, and nobody could touch it. And one day, somebody did touch it, and then that person became the chief Inare. His family became the Royal Scythians, and they had a whole caste system set up. It was all based on this fabricated myth that these golden objects had come from the sky, and the most important of the golden objects was the Grail. There was also a plow and a sword, maybe, or a battle axe. So there's basically, you got your warrior culture, you got your priesthood and your super elite, and you got your farmers there on the bottom. So that's the way they divided up their society. It was all based on who your father and mother were. Now you notice that King Arthur has 12 battles he has to fight, and that's really a reference to King Arthur being a solar deity. It's the 12 months of the year. It's the same thing as the disciples. It's the same thing as the 12 labors of Hercules. And there's a lot of similarities between Hercules, and King Arthur. You'll find a mythical character in the Black Sea area called Bactria, who's very closely related to King Arthur. A lot of the same elements. The magic sword is given by the Lady of the Lake, and then is thrown back into into the Black Sea afterwards. And it's so easy to uncover this trail of how cannabis played such a big role in myth in the time when the religions were born. The thing people don't understand about all these religions is almost all the avatars are complete myths. They never existed. They're magical stories. I hate to see people so upset over this stuff, because when you tell a Buddhist or a Christian or a Jew that, Moses and Jesus and Buddha are all, like Hercules. They're just, fabrications, mythical stories intended to, enchant and, amaze. And it still works today. The thing about religion is it's magic. It's a fabrication. It's not real unless you believe. And if you believe, then it's as real can be. The key is just to create some story that's so fantastical that it could only be attributed to divine interventions. But what you find is, these magical stories are just made up. And all through the history of magic, you'll find people fabricating these magical ceremonies, these seances. It's all an illusion that they create in order to capture believers. And there's nothing real there. Magic is real in that it affects people's minds. And it's fun to play with. You can't do ceremonies without it. So we're never going to live in a world without magic. The secret is to understand it better and not to be hoodwinked into these fundamentalist religions that basically are just a magic show. I respect the ceremonies of our ancestors, and I think that it's perfectly fine to celebrate those ceremonies. But what we have to do is discard all the dogma, the rules that came with it, because all that was a fabrication. There's really only one rule: don't hurt anybody. And if you notice, they use religion to violate that rule more than anything else. Everything is twisted. Religions are not the source of enlightenment. They're a tool for social control, which doesn't mean that you can't believe in them or respect them or enjoy the poetry and all that. You can't use them as an excuse to hurt people. It's not valid. Now, what happened is a real avatar emerged to end this war for profit hoodwink that was going on. He was born of a Jewish father who was one of the second generation of Christians. So he's a Christian Jew living in Persia, married to a Zoroastrian woman. So their child was raised in a multicultural environment and was raised as both a Christian and as a Zoroastrian. Now, the Zoroastrians are the foundation of Christianity and Judaism, because the first Zoroastrian king of Persia was the one who, conquered Babylon, freed the Jews, and told them to go back and build the temple in Jerusalem. Now, this happened before the Jews had a written language. So you can imagine the impact of Zoroastrian ideas into Judaism when it's first written down. This guy was the biggest hero the Jews ever had. Zoroastrians were drinking this concoction of cannabis and milk. Now, Moses is an invented character based on Zoroaster. Zoroaster's got a magic background too, so he's probably a mythical avatar, no doubt. I mean, some of these characters, no doubt, have some references to some people that lived, they're kind of like, but they put all this magic on top of that, and so whatever real person or persons existed to inspire this avatar, they could disappear completely in this, enchanting envelope of magical stories that they build. And that's needed to convince people that, hey, this is the real story, because obviously none of this could be happening if this wasn't divine. Being born of a virgin, dying and floating off into the sky, waving bye-bye. Where's he floating? I mean, is he going to Mars or Jupiter or what? The stories are obvious inventions. They bear no resemblance to real life. If it doesn't replicate every generation, it's probably a fabrication, because the same dramas and traumas are what we've been going through for forever. The technologies change, but I think a lot of the underlying movies are pretty much the same. And what you discover right away is, if you study history, is that the ruthless people win. The good people that want to spread joy and happiness, those people are so easily crushed and played by ruthless people who will pretend, to be a nice person, and in the end will, steal your everything from you, because that's what they want, whatever you got. This boy, born of a Christian father and a Persian mother, was quite unusual. And as like a 12 or 13-year-old, he was taken to the Magi. You know the story in the Bible where the Magi come to attend the birth of Christ. That's an allegorical story. The Magi are the Zoroastrian priests. They're at the tippy top of the Zoroastrian magic show. So that allegory is just meant to show you that Christianity was born out of Zoroastrianism. When Mani, M-A-N-I, was taken to meet the Magi, he astounded them with his take on the meaning of life and spirituality, and he believed light was the source of spirituality, which, of course, for most religions came out of solar deities. So obviously the light of the sun, is driving everybody's idea of what divine force is. Many adopted a lot of ideas, though, about light from all the stars and the light of the moon, which he thought was Jesus. Jesus was the light of the moon for Mani. But what Mani was really doing was preaching nonviolence, just trying to find a holy life. He was pretty fanatical about it too, because he didn't eat meat. But he told people, hey, as long as you don't kill it, it's okay to eat it. If you didn't do the killing, don't let it go to waste. But don't kill anything. And he would just take anything that was freely given, like a fruit fell from a tree or a nut fell from a tree, or but he wouldn't dig up roots, harm plants. And he was a great artist, first of all. I think that's one thing to understand about the real avatars of the world, is that they're the creative geniuses, like Bob Marley. That's where real Holy Spirit is working. It's not some guy who inherited $1 billion network of churches and wears a big hat, and it's not that person. And these avatars are also not old people. They emerge as teenagers. A lot of them will do their best work as teenagers, like the people that invented hip hop or Rimbaud. If you go through and you look at, there's a certain time in your life right before you enter manhood when you have the best shot at creating something really new. And the more indoctrinated you get into your society as you get older, the less chance you have of breaking ground. Mani broke ground and became like an inspirational figure. He was making paintings. He's a very famous painter. He was writing poetry and songs, and everybody just wanted to hang out with Mani, and then he wrote his own Bible, like 23 chapters, and it's all in a unique style of calligraphy, which Manny has invented. And oh my gosh, the Manny fanatics are everywhere now. They're popping up. They're building their churches. They're copying Manny's Bible. Hey, this is the biggest thing in the world right now, okay? And oh man, Rome is stitched together, held together through the force of its mercenary army. And its mercenary army is converting to Manny's religion in astounding numbers. They're forsaking the official Roman religion because they like what Manny's saying. And I do believe that Manny is pushing marijuana at this time, because why wouldn't he? And what you notice is they destroyed and disappeared everything. All his churches, every copy of the Bible, every painting. It's astounding how the guy was erased from history. And here he was, the real avatar. And this is happening about 300 years after the alleged so-called birth of the imaginary Jesus Christ. Both Manny and Jesus Christ were using an oil to heal the blind and lame. And since we know that cannabis oil can stave off glaucoma and multiple sclerosis, I'd say there's a good shot that Manny's oil, which was also known as the oil of Abraham or Abralim by all the occultics. They had their own recipe of the magic oil. Crowley had his recipe. But what you notice is none of these recipes list cannabis as the primary ingredient, which it obviously was. So there you go, see? So not only was cannabis erased from the origins of the religions where it played the dominant role, but it was erased from the occult secret religions, which are supposed to be the real magic, but hey, that's just another magic show too. So, I mean, the lesson here is don't follow leaders. They're all, looking for lemmings. There's only one rule: don't hurt anybody. Anybody tells you any different, they're a false prophet. So Manny got erased and marijuana got erased. And this happened at the same time that Constantine, the emperor of Rome, decided to switch Rome from a pagan culture to a Christian. And what they did was they soaked up a lot of Manny's juice. A lot of the stories of Jesus parallel the stories of Manny, but they supposedly happened 200 years earlier. So they kind of leapfrogged into the past and pumped the Jesus Christ stories and myths up, embellished them so that they could replace Manny. Because, Manny had been recognized as a living Buddha in India and had gone to live there to avoid persecution. And he was lured back into Persia by the king of Persia for the express purpose of torturing and killing him. And he was skinned alive and decapitated. His head was put on a pike, and the gate where they displayed the severed head, that's still called Manny's Gate today in Persia. But nobody knows anything about Manny, really, or the fact that he actually had a shot at ending war over religion by successfully unifying every single religion on earth. So, this was a mission, a great mission, that worthy of tremendous respect throughout history. And it just got erased. So what you're going to find is the real avatars, the real creative forces, the real ones that are pushing true enlightenment, harmony, and peace on earth. These people are going to get replaced very quickly by a fake avatar, or one that's going to encourage the thinking of one culture supersedes all other cultures. They're not going to push the idea that all cultures, all people are basically the same. There's good and bad people in all cultures. And no, they want to demonize certain cultures and go on attack mode, create jihads and crusades. And this is all done for money. It's not done to enlighten people or to save them. It's done because it makes a lot of profit. And it always will. So the man who tried to take out the prophet, wake the world up, end war for religion, completely disappeared.